It was a cold evening, the kind where the wind cut through your clothes and made every step outside feel heavier than the last. The man, whose name was Daniel, had stayed later than usual at work, finishing some paperwork that couldn't wait until tomorrow. By the time he walked out of the small office building, the sun had already disappeared behind the horizon, leaving the streets in a soft twilight. He pulled his coat tighter around himself, feeling the chill creep under his collar. Normally, he would have rushed straight to his car, eager to get home to warmth and comfort, but something made him slow his pace that night. As he walked along the quiet road, he noticed a small shape sitting at the side of the street. At first, he thought it might be a child, lost or waiting for someone. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't quite like any child he had ever seen before. The figure was small, almost fragile, hunched over as if trying to protect itself from the cold. Its skin had a faint, unusual shimmer that reflected the dim streetlight, and its eyes were larger than a normal human child's, glowing slightly in the dark. Daniel stopped in his tracks, unsure of what he was seeing. His mind raced, wondering if he should call for help or just leave. But the sight of the small figure shivering in the cold tugged at something deep inside him. "Hey," Daniel said softly, careful not to scare the child. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The small figure didn't respond, only hugged its knees tighter, shivering visibly. Daniel took a cautious step closer, noting that the boy, or whatever it was wearing thin clothing. Not nearly enough for the weather. The chill in the air was harsh, and anyone without proper clothing would struggle. Daniel looked around for anyone near neighbors passers-by, or maybe someone who belonged to the child, but the street was empty, silent except for the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Daniel's heart felt heavy. He knew that leaving the child there in the cold wasn't an option. Every instinct told him to act, to offer some help. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the jacket he had been wearing. A thick, warm piece that he usually reserved for especially cold days. "Here," he said gently, kneeling down to the child's level. "You can wear this. It'll help keep you warm." The boy looked up slowly, his wide eyes filled with curiosity and caution. Daniel noticed that his features were delicate, almost ethereal, unlike any child he had ever seen before. The boy's ears were slightly pointed, and his skin had a subtle bluish tint, which became more visible under the dim light. He looked fragile, almost otherworldly, but there was a hint of fear in his gaze. For a moment, the boy didn't move, just stared at the jacket and then back at Daniel. He seemed unsure, as if he didn't understand completely what was happening, or didn't know if he could trust this stranger. Daniel smiled gently, trying to show that he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I just want to help you. You don't have to be afraid." Slowly, almost hesitantly, the boy reached out and took the jacket. Daniel watched as the child tried to put it on, the sleeve slightly too long, the material unfamiliar but warm. When the jacket finally covered him, the boy let out a small sigh, a sound of relief that made Daniel's chest feel lighter. He could see that the warmth was comforting, and the shivering began to fade. Daniel felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief that the boy was now warmer, but also curiosity about who or what he was. "Do you live around here?" he asked gently, kneeling beside him. The boy shook his head slowly. "No." "Far," he whispered, his voice soft and melodic, not quite like any human child's voice Daniel had heard before. Daniel realized then that this child had traveled far from somewhere, alone and vulnerable. He wondered how it had ended up here, in the middle of a human neighborhood, at night, in the cold. The more he looked at the boy, the more he realized that he was unlike any child he had seen in his entire life. There was something special, almost magical about him. Daniel decided he couldn't leave the boy there. "Come with me," he said gently. "I'll help you get somewhere safe. You can stay warm, and we'll figure things out." The boy hesitated, looking at him with wide, cautious eyes, but then nodded slowly. Daniel held out his hand, and after a moment, the boy took it. It was small and cold, but surprisingly soft, almost delicate. Daniel felt a strong sense of protectiveness wash over him, a need to keep this fragile being safe. As they walked down the empty streets together, Daniel noticed small things about the boy that made him even more aware of how different he was. There were faint markings on his clothing, glowing slightly as they moved, and his movements were fluid, almost graceful. Like he was used to moving in a different environment. They reached Daniel's car, and he helped the boy in, wrapping the jacket around him even more snugly. The boy's eyes, large and shining, looked up at him, filled with a quiet gratitude that needed no words. Daniel smiled, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the jacket or the heat of the car. He realized that this small act of offering a coat to someone in need had created a connection, fragile but real, between two beings from completely different worlds. He didn't know who the boy was or where he came from, but he knew he couldn't just turn away. Driving home, Daniel kept glancing at the boy sitting quietly beside him. The boy didn't speak much, only occasionally letting out a soft breath or adjusting the jacket to cover himself better. Daniel noticed that he seemed curious about everything, his eyes taking in the car interior, the streetlights outside, and even Daniel himself. There was an intelligence in those eyes, a depth that went far beyond what a child of his age would normally show. Daniel felt both awe and responsibility. He knew that whatever the boy was, he had to be careful, gentle, and understanding. He couldn't imagine what the boy had been through to end up alone on the street tonight. When they finally reached Daniel's small apartment, he helped the boy inside. The warmth of the home made the boy visibly relax, and he finally allowed himself to smile, a small, shy gesture that lit up his delicate features. Daniel smiled back, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that for now, the boy was safe, warm, and not alone. Daniel felt a connection, fragile yet undeniable, forming between them. It was the kind of connection that comes from genuine care, empathy, and a willingness to see someone else's need before your own. That night, as Daniel watched the boy curl up on the couch under a blanket, he couldn't stop thinking about how one small act of kindness, offering a jacket, had changed everything. He wondered about the boy's world, his home, and the life he had left behind. There was a sense of mystery, but it wasn't frightening. It was intriguing, almost magical. Daniel felt a quiet hope that this encounter, strange and unexpected as it was, could lead to something meaningful for both of them. He realized that life sometimes surprises you in the simplest ways: a warm coat, a gentle smile. And a decision to help someone in need could open doors to experiences you never imagined. As he went to bed that night, Daniel felt a mix of excitement and curiosity about what the future would bring. He didn't know how the story would unfold, but he knew one thing for sure. Tonight, he had done the right thing. And that small act of warmth might just change everything, not only for the boy, but for him as well. The night was quiet, but in that quiet, a bond had begun to form, a bond that neither time nor distance could easily break. The next morning, Daniel woke up to a strange, almost unreal sound outside his apartment. At first, he thought he was dreaming. The sun had not fully risen, and a soft light filtered through his curtains, painting the room in pale gold. But the sound was real, faint whispering voices, different from anything he had ever heard. Curious and slightly nervous, he got out of bed and walked cautiously to the door. When he opened it, he could hardly believe his eyes. Standing on his doorstep were several figures, women, but unlike any human women he had seen. Their features were elegant and refined, with skin in soft shades that shimmered faintly, like moonlight reflecting on water. Their eyes were large, expressive, and filled with intelligence and curiosity. Their hair flowed in unusual colors, from silver to soft violet, and seemed to move as if caught in a gentle breeze, though there was no wind. They wore clothing that looked like it had been woven from light itself, soft fabrics that moved with them gracefully. They did not look threatening, but their presence was commanding. Almost regal, Daniel stepped back, unsure whether to call out or stay silent. Good morning," he said cautiously, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can I help you?" One of the women stepped forward. Her voice was soft, melodic, but carried a quiet authority. "We come on behalf of the boy," she said. Daniel froze. "The boy," he repeated. "You mean him?" He glanced over his shoulder at the small figure sitting quietly on the couch behind him. The boy, wrapped in the jacket, peeked out with wide, cautious eyes, holding the blanket tightly around his shoulders. "Yes," the woman replied. "He is our responsibility. You have shown him warmth, care, and protection. We have come to thank you." Daniel's mind struggled to process what he was seeing and hearing. Alien women at his door, thanking him for helping a child who was clearly not human. For a moment, he wondered if he was dreaming or if this was some kind of elaborate trick. But the sincerity in their eyes, the calmness in their voices, told him otherwise. He realized he could not ignore them or turn them away. "Okay. I don't know what to say," Daniel admitted, his voice trembling slightly. "I just saw him outside and wanted to help. That's all." He felt a mix of nervousness and awe. He had helped many people in his life, but never anything like this. Never a situation where his simple kindness had brought beings from another world to his doorstep. The women did not smile in the way humans would, but there was a quiet warmth in their expressions. "Your actions are rare," the same woman said, her voice calm yet firm. "In our world, care for our young is sacred. You have shown qualities we value greatly. We wish to acknowledge them properly." Daniel nodded slowly, still unsure how to respond. He felt honored, but the situation was overwhelming. He glanced at the boy who had quietly come to stand beside him. The boy's eyes seemed to reflect a mix of relief and pride, as if he understood that Daniel's act had consequences far beyond what he could imagine. Daniel realized that the boy was more than just vulnerable. He was important, special in ways he could not yet comprehend. The alien women moved gracefully closer, their steps silent, almost floating. Daniel noticed the faint hum in the air around them, a vibration that seemed to resonate softly with his own heartbeat. It was subtle but unmistakable, a feeling that something extraordinary was happening. He could sense that their world was different in ways beyond physical appearance, that their emotions, their ways of showing respect and gratitude, were deeply layered and meaningful. One of the women spoke again, this time addressing the boy. "He has helped you," she said softly. "You are safe because of him." The boy nodded, and for the first time he spoke a little more confidently. "I thank him," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Daniel felt a surge of pride and warmth. Realizing the boy's words carried weight and meaning far beyond his years or size, the women turned back to Daniel. "We wish to explain our customs," the first woman said. "It is unusual for humans to interact with our kind in this manner. We hope you will listen with an open mind." Daniel nodded, feeling that despite the strangeness of the situation, he wanted to understand. He realized that these women were offering him a glimpse into a world he had never imagined, a world connected to the boy he had helped. For the next few hours, Daniel listened as they shared fragments of their society, their values, and their roles as caretakers. They spoke about how young ones in their world are precious, how acts of kindness toward them are remembered and respected for a lifetime. They explained that the boy was considered special, a child with potential that few others possessed, and that helping him was seen as a noble act, worthy of gratitude and recognition. Daniel realized that in their culture, the simple act of offering warmth and comfort was far more significant than it would be in his own human world. As the conversation continued, Daniel noticed that the women were not only observing him, but also interacting subtly with each other, communicating through gestures and expressions that were almost like a silent language. He realized that they were assessing him, not in a judgmental way, but to understand the qualities that had led him to help the boy without hesitation or question. He felt a strange sense of being accepted, even though he was completely foreign to their world. Throughout the morning, the boy stayed close to Daniel, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand or peek up at him with trusting eyes. Daniel felt an increasing sense of responsibility, realizing that the boy's trust in him had connected their worlds in ways he could not yet fully understand. He also began to see the alien women not just as visitors, but as protectors, deeply invested in the well-being of the boy, and by extension, now aware of him as well. By mid-morning, Daniel began to feel a strange sense of calm amidst the unusual situation. The women's presence, while overwhelming, was not threatening. Instead, it was respectful, almost ceremonial. They were there to honor an act of kindness, and in doing so, they were offering him an opportunity to see beyond the boundaries of his human understanding. Daniel realized that this encounter, unexpected and surreal, was a turning point. He had entered into a world where empathy, care, and respect were measured in ways he had never considered. At one point, one of the women extended a hand toward him, not in a formal gesture, but in a subtle acknowledgement of his role. "You have shown compassion," she said. "We wish to honor that. It is rare to find a human with such understanding." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of humility and pride. He had only offered a jacket, only tried to help someone in need. Yet the impact of that small gesture was far beyond what he could have imagined. The boy tugged gently on his sleeve, and Daniel knelt down beside him. "It's okay," he whispered, unsure of whether the boy fully understood the women's words. The boy's eyes met his, and Daniel saw a silent communication, of shared understanding of safety, gratitude, and trust. It was a moment that felt timeless, quiet acknowledgement that their lives were now intertwined in ways that neither could fully predict. As the morning wore on, Daniel began to understand that the women were not just here to express gratitude, they were offering him a connection, an entry into a world that was unlike anything he had known. He felt a mixture of wonder and caution. This was extraordinary, surreal, but also deeply meaningful. The realization that a single act of kindness had created this ripple effect filled him with both awe and responsibility by the time the sun was fully up. Daniel knew that nothing would be the same again. The boy was safe. The alien women had come to express their respect and gratitude. He had been given a glimpse into a culture far beyond his own. He realized that the act of helping someone in need, no matter how small, could open doors to experiences and connections he had never imagined. As he prepared breakfast for the boy, with the alien women quietly observing, Daniel felt a quiet sense of purpose. He knew that his life had changed, that he was now part of a story far larger than himself. And while he didn't yet know where it would lead, he understood one truth clearly. Kindness had a power that transcended worlds, species, and even the most unlikely circumstances. As the days passed, Daniel found himself slowly becoming part of a world he had never imagined. What had started as a simple act of kindness, offering his jacket to a cold, shivering boy, had grown into something far more significant. The alien women continued to visit his apartment, though their visits were never intrusive. They moved with a quiet grace, observing him, interacting with the boy, and gently sharing pieces of their culture. Every day brought new surprises. Daniel began to realize just how extraordinary his situation had become. He spent the mornings learning small things from them. Though communication was sometimes challenging, their language was melodic, filled with soft tones and subtle inflections that human ears were not accustomed to. Yet they were patient with him. Slowly, through gestures, expressions, and a few words he could understand, Daniel began to grasp their culture and values. One thing became clear very quickly in their world. Acts of kindness toward the young were considered sacred, and helping the boy in a moment of need had earned Daniel respect beyond anything he could have imagined. The boy, whose name Daniel had learned was Liar, was a constant companion. He had a quiet curiosity about the human world, and Daniel found himself both teaching and learning from him. Liar loved the small routines of human life, the warmth of a blanket, the taste of simple foods, the sound of rain tapping against the window. Daniel showed him how to make tea, how to fold clothes neatly, and even how to play small, human games. Liar's large, expressive eyes watched every move, and he often mimicked Daniel, a small smile lighting up his delicate features. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in months, warmed not just by the boy's presence, but also by the growing sense of connection. The alien women often stayed nearby while Daniel and Liar interacted. They rarely spoke in human words, but Daniel could feel their attention and their curiosity. Sometimes they would observe silently, their expressions unreadable but thoughtful. Other times, they would exchange soft, almost musical phrases among themselves. And Daniel got the sense that they were discussing him not in judgment, but in consideration, weighing the qualities that had led him to help Liar so unhesitatingly. It was clear that they valued traits such as patience, compassion, and respect. And Daniel began to see that his ordinary human behavior had earned extraordinary recognition in their world. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Daniel noticed one of the women, whose name he learned was Alara, standing near the doorway. She watched him with a quiet intensity, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and approval. "You are different," she said softly, her voice melodic but understandable. "You see him, the boy, not as a tool, not as a problem, but as someone to protect." Daniel smiled, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I just did what I thought was right," he replied. "I couldn't leave him outside in the cold." Alara inclined her head, a gesture that seemed almost ceremonial. "That is why we respect you," she said. "Kindness is rare among humans, but you have shown it freely." Over time, Daniel began to notice subtle signs of Liar's world blending with his own. Small things like faint symbols that appeared on Liar's clothing, glowing softly when he was happy or excited, or the gentle hum in the air when the women were near reminded him that he was not merely helping a child, but participating in something far larger. The alien women had entrusted him in a way with a part of their world. Every moment spent with them, every conversation and shared gesture, built trust and mutual respect. Daniel felt a growing responsibility to honor that trust, and he found himself more thoughtful, more patient, and more attentive to the needs of others than he had ever been before. One afternoon, Alara invited Daniel to sit with her and Liar in a quiet corner of the living room. She gestured for him to relax, and as he did, she began to explain more about their society. "Our world is structured differently," she said, her tone calm and steady. "We value those who act without expecting reward. You helped him, and that action resonates far beyond what you see." Daniel listened intently, fascinated by the philosophy and the depth of thought behind their actions. He realized that kindness in this world was not a small gesture, but a thread that wove communities and relationships together, creating bonds that lasted lifetimes. Daniel also began to notice small, human-like emotions in the women emotions that were familiar, even though they were expressed differently. They showed concern for Liar, pride when he learned something new, and curiosity when Daniel shared a piece of human culture. There was also a quiet warmth directed toward him, subtle acknowledgement that he was now part of a world that once felt completely unreachable. He found himself feeling a deep respect and admiration for these women, who had responsibilities far beyond his understanding, but carried them with grace and intelligence. In the evenings, Daniel would sit with Liar and the women, sharing stories of Earth and listening to tales from their own world. Liar would laugh softly at the strange human customs Daniel described, while the women observed with quiet amusement, occasionally correcting him or adding details from their own culture. Daniel realized that even small moments of sharing could create profound understanding. He felt that the distance between their worlds, human and alien, was shrinking, not through force or explanation, but through trust, patience, and kindness. Over time, Daniel began to see patterns in their behavior. The women often seemed to coordinate without speaking, each action thoughtful and purposeful. They were protective of Liar, but also attentive to him and to Daniel. He sensed that their respect for him was growing, not just because he had helped the boy, but because he had continued to act with patience, care, and humility. Every day he spent with them, he felt more connected, more responsible, and more aware of the ripple effects of his actions. It was as if his decision to offer a jacket had set in motion a chain of events that could change not just his life, but the boys and perhaps even theirs. One evening, as Daniel tucked Liar into a blanket for the night, he noticed a small gesture from Alara that caught him by surprise. She placed her hand briefly on his shoulder, a light, almost imperceptible touch. But it carried a sense of acknowledgement and gratitude. Daniel felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that this connection was deeper than words could express. It was a bond formed through trust, care, and shared experience, a bond that transcended species, culture, and even the boundaries of what he thought was possible. Daniel also began to reflect on his own life. Noticing how this experience had changed him, he was more patient, more understanding, and more aware of the needs of others. Small acts of kindness, he realized, were never truly small. They could create connections, inspired trust, and even open doors to worlds he had never imagined. The realization filled him with a quiet sense of purpose, a feeling that his life had meaning beyond the routines and responsibilities that had once consumed him. By the end of the week, Daniel had settled into a rhythm with Lyre and the women. Mornings were spent in quiet learning, afternoons in small adventures and shared activities, and evenings in reflection and conversation. Each day brought new insights, new moments of connection, and new reasons to marvel at the unexpected turn his life had taken. He realized that what had begun as a simple act of kindness had blossomed into a journey of understanding, trust, and connection, a journey that was only just beginning as Daniel lay in bed that night. He thought about the boy sleeping safely nearby and the alien women who had quietly entered his life. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for them, but for the chance to experience something extraordinary. He understood, more clearly than ever, that empathy, patience, and care were forces that could transcend even the most unimaginable differences. And in that quiet, reflective moment, Daniel realized that he had become part of a story much larger than himself, a story of connection, trust, and the power of small acts to create lasting change. As the days continued, Daniel felt his life changing in ways he had never imagined. What had started as a simple act of freeing a jacket to a cold boy was now unfolding into a connection that went far beyond human understanding. The alien women visited more frequently, their presence becoming a familiar part of his daily life. Their grace, intelligence, and subtle ways of communicating fascinated him. At the same time, he noticed that their respect and trust for him were growing. It was not just for helping Lyre, the boy, but also because he continued to show patience, care, and understanding without expecting anything in return. Daniel spent much of his time with Lyre, helping him adjust to human routines while learning more about Lyre's unique abilities and nature. Lyre had an almost natural curiosity about everything Daniel did. Even the smallest things fascinated him: how water flowed from a tap, the feel of warm food, the way books could hold stories that lasted for generations. Daniel enjoyed teaching Lyre, but he also learned from him. The boy's perspective was different, untainted by human biases or habits, and his insights often made Daniel see the world in a new way. The alien women observed quietly, occasionally offering guidance or correcting a small misunderstanding. Their presence was never imposing. Instead, it carried a calm, almost ceremonial air. Daniel began to understand that their world valued observation, reflection, and careful action. They did not rush, did not push, and did not demand attention. Their communication was subtle through gestures, expressions, and soft tones, but Daniel gradually learned to read it. He found that he could understand more with each passing day, even without words, and this created a sense of deep connection. One afternoon, as Daniel helped Lyre practice simple tasks, Alara approached and spoke softly. "You understand him," she said. "Not as a burden, not as a responsibility, but as someone to support and guide. That is rare among humans." Daniel paused, thinking about her words. "I don't know if I fully understand," he admitted. "I just know that he needed help, and I wanted to be there for him." Alara inclined her head slightly, a gesture of approval. "That is enough. Your actions show who you are." Over time, Daniel began to notice subtle interactions between the women themselves. They communicated in ways that were almost invisible to him at first: small gestures, gentle glances, and brief touches that seemed to convey entire sentences. He realized that they were discussing him as much as they were discussing Lyre. They were assessing his character, observing his patience, his humility, and the way he treated the boy in their world with respect. Daniel did not feel judged or pressured. Instead, he felt a quiet acknowledgement, a gentle recognition that he had become part of something larger than himself. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel found that his bond with the alien women grew stronger. They began to trust him more, inviting him into small aspects of their culture. He learned about their values, their traditions, and their expectations. They explained that in their society, acts of kindness and empathy toward the young are not merely appreciated, they are revered. By helping Liar, Daniel had unknowingly demonstrated qualities they held in the highest regard, and though he had done nothing extraordinary by his own understanding, in their eyes, he had proven himself to be someone worthy of trust and respect. The boy, Liar, was at the center of this growing connection. He would often watch Daniel and the women, learning from each interaction, absorbing lessons about trust, kindness, and respect. His large eyes would follow every gesture, every word, and every expression, and Daniel felt a sense of responsibility, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Liar depended on him not just for guidance and protection, but also for understanding a connection that bridged to very different worlds. One evening, as Daniel prepared a simple meal, Alara approached him. "You have changed," she said softly. "Not just in what you do, but in how you think. You act with care, with patience, and with understanding. You see beyond yourself." Daniel paused, a quiet warmth spreading through his chest. I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I just try to do what's right." Lara smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed to carry more meaning than words could express. "That is why you are becoming important to us. Not because you seek reward, but because your heart is true." As the evening continued, Daniel found himself reflecting on the weeks that had passed. His life had been ordinary before, filled with routines, responsibilities, and little excitement. Now, he was part of something extraordinary, a connection that crossed the boundaries of species and culture. He realized that his small act of kindness had created a ripple effect, touching not only Liar, but also the alien women, and in ways he did not yet fully understand. Their world. The alien women began to show subtle signs of emotional attachment. Though it was expressed differently than human emotions, their respect for him was clear, but there was also a quiet warmth, a gentle acknowledgement of his presence and his actions. Daniel found himself feeling a mixture of pride, humility, and wonder. He had never imagined that helping a single boy could lead to such deep and meaningful relationships. Yet here he was, learning, growing, and forming bonds that were rare and precious. One morning, Daniel noticed that the women had brought small gifts for Liar, delicate objects made from materials that seemed to glow softly. They placed them carefully in front of the boy, and he touched them with awe and curiosity. Daniel watched the scene, realizing that these gestures were not just about giving objects, they were about connection, respect, and the passing of values from one generation to the next. He understood that in their culture, every action carried meaning, and every gift was a symbol of trust and care. Over time, Daniel's presence became an important part of their routine. The women would seek his opinion on small matters concerning Liar, trusting his judgment and valuing his perspective. They observed his patience, his care, and his willingness to act with understanding. Daniel realized that his role was not just as a helper or protector, but also as a bridge between two worlds, a human and an alien, a boy and his guardians. As days turned into weeks, Daniel began to feel a profound sense of belonging. He was no longer just a visitor in this strange, otherworldly connection. He had become part of it. Liar depended on him, the women trusted him, and Daniel found a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. Every moment spent together was an opportunity to learn, to teach, and to grow. And though the world outside remained unchanged, within his apartment, a small universe of connection, trust, and care had formed by the end of this period. Daniel realized that his life had been irrevocably transformed. What had begun as a single act of kindness had created a chain of events that he could never have predicted. The boy was safe, the women were connected to him, and he had become a part of something larger, more meaningful than he had ever imagined. He felt a quiet sense of pride and humility, understanding that true value often comes from the simplest gestures, the willingness to help, to care, and to act with empathy. One evening, as Daniel watched Liar asleep under a warm blanket, the alien women standing quietly nearby, he understood the depth of what had happened. His life had changed not because of power, wealth, or skill, but because he had chosen to act with kindness. and in doing so, he had built connections that crossed worlds, hearts, and species, a bond that was rare, precious, and transformative. Daniel knew that this was only the beginning. The relationships he had formed would continue to grow, and the boy's life, as well as his own, would never be the same. The story that had begun with a single jacket, a simple gesture in the cold, had blossomed into something extraordinary. It was a story of trust, respect, and the quiet power of human compassion, a story that Daniel would carry with him for the rest of his life. Over the following days, Daniel felt a sense of calm settle over him, mixed with excitement and curiosity. His life, which had once been ordinary and predictable, was now filled with wonder and unexpected responsibility. The boy, Liar, had grown comfortable and confident, his initial shyness replaced by quiet curiosity and a gentle playfulness. Daniel watched him often, noticing the small changes in his behavior, the way he smiled more easily, the way his laughter echoed softly through the apartment, and the way he looked at Daniel with trust and admiration. It was a trust that Daniel felt deeply, a trust that strengthened the invisible bonds that had formed between them all. The alien women continued to visit, their presence calm yet commanding. Each of them had their own way of interacting, their own subtleties in speech, gestures, and expressions, yet all shared a common warmth and intelligence. Daniel realized that they were not only observing him, but also supporting Liar, subtly guiding his growth while showing respect for Daniel's role in the boy's life. The women's behavior was never intrusive. They did not dictate, scold, or demand attention. Instead, they moved with quiet purpose, teaching through example, sharing wisdom in soft tones, and communicating with the boy in ways he instinctively understood. One morning, Daniel noticed that the women had gathered more deliberately than usual, their posture and expressions conveying seriousness, yet not hostility. Alara, the leader among them, spoke in her soft, melodic voice. "You have shown patience, understanding, and care," she said. "You have become a part of our circle. Your presence affects the boy and our people. You are valued here." Daniel felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had not expected recognition or reward. All he had wanted was to help Liar, to provide warmth and safety when it was needed most. Yet now he realized that his actions had touched a world far beyond his own, creating connections that went deeper than he could have imagined. The boy, Liar, tugged gently at Daniel's sleeve, his large eyes filled with curiosity. "They like you," he whispered. Daniel smiled down at him. "I think they do," he replied softly. He realized that these words were only a small reflection of the truth. The women's regard for him was profound, subtle, and almost ceremonial. Their respect was earned, not given freely, and Daniel felt a quiet sense of wonder at the weight of their approval. It was humbling, yet uplifting, to know that his simple act of kindness had resonated so strongly as the week progressed. Daniel became more integrated into the alien women's routines and small ceremonies. They invited him to participate in quiet rituals, simple acts that held deep meaning, like arranging objects in precise patterns, sharing stories in symbolic sequences, or offering small gestures of respect and acknowledgement. Daniel watched and learned, realizing that these acts were not merely cultural traditions, but expressions of values that had guided their society for generations. Through them, he began to understand more fully the importance of intention, mindfulness, and empathy in all actions. The bond between Daniel and Liar continued to grow stronger. Daniel spent hours teaching the boy about human life, sharing both practical skills and small joys, cooking simple meals, exploring the city, reading books, and learning about the seasons and weather. Liar's curiosity was insatiable. He asked questions that made Daniel think deeply. Questions about the stars, about time, about the way different beings perceive the world. In these moments, Daniel realized that their connection was reciprocal. He was teaching the boy, yes, but Liar was also teaching him, showing him new ways to see the world, to appreciate the small, meaningful details that humans often overlooked. The alien women observed these interactions with quiet approval, their presence comforting and reassuring. Sometimes they would join in, offering a gentle correction here or a thoughtful suggestion there, but always in ways that respected both Daniel's role and Lyra's autonomy. Daniel noticed that they communicated among themselves in ways he could not fully understand, yet he could sense the subtle approval, admiration, and respect conveyed in their shared expressions and gestures. It became clear to him that his actions had earned their trust, and that trust carried a quiet weight and responsibility. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Alara approached Daniel with a thoughtful expression. "You have changed our boy's world," she said softly, "but also you have changed ours. Your care, your patience, your kindness, they are rare and valued." Daniel felt his heart swell. He had never imagined that one small act could lead to such profound impact. I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "I just wanted to help him." Lara's gaze held his, gentle yet unwavering. "That is what makes it special," she said. "You acted without expectation, without reward. That is why you are important to us." Over the following days, Daniel continued to integrate himself further into their lives. The alien women began to include him in more aspects of their world, showing him symbols, traditions, and subtle practices that conveyed respect, trust, and honor. Daniel realized that he was being offered more than just acknowledgement. He was being included in a society entirely different from his own, one that valued intention, empathy, and the care of others above all. It was an honor he did not take lightly, and he found himself striving to live up to their trust and regard in every action. No matter how small, Lyra, meanwhile, thrived under Daniel's guidance and the women's watchful care. The boy's confidence grew, and he began to explore his abilities and environment with quiet courage. Daniel noticed the joy and curiosity in his eyes, the way he moved with both grace and careful observation. It was evident that Lyra's world had expanded as much as Daniel's had, and that this shared journey was shaping both of their lives in profound ways. One morning, Daniel was preparing breakfast when he noticed the women standing quietly in the doorway, their expressions calm yet deliberate. Alara stepped forward. "We have observed your patience, your guidance, and your care," she said. "You have proven yourself to be a guardian, not just for him, but in spirit, for our values. We wish for you to continue with us, to remain connected in a lasting way." Daniel felt a mixture of surprise, humility, and warmth. He had not expected anything like this. To be invited into their world so fully, to be offered such recognition and trust, was beyond anything he could have imagined. The boy tugged at his sleeve once more. "Stay with us," Lyra said softly. Daniel looked at him, and then at the women, understanding the depth of their request. It was more than an invitation. It was an acknowledgement of the connection that had formed, a recognition that his presence had become essential to their lives. Daniel felt a quiet certainty in his heart. He knew that staying with them, continuing to guide and support Lyra, and being part of this extraordinary circle was the right path. Over the next few days, Daniel settled fully into his role. He continued to teach, guide, and care for Lyra, while also learning from the women and observing their culture. Each interaction deepened his understanding. Each small gesture strengthened the bonds between them, and each day brought new moments of connection, wonder, and quiet joy. Daniel realized that the ripple effect of his initial act, the offering of a jacket, had grown into a network of trust, care, and respect that spanned worlds and quiet moments. Daniel reflected on the journey. He thought about the cold evening when he had first seen Lyra shivering, about this small decision to offer warmth and protection, and about how that moment had led to a life filled with wonder, trust, and meaningful connection. He understood, more clearly than ever, that empathy and kindness were powerful forces, capable of bridging worlds, building trust, and creating bonds that could last a lifetime by the end of this chapter in his life. Daniel knew that nothing would ever be the same again. He had found a purpose beyond his imagination, a connection deeper than he had ever expected, and a family that transcended species, culture, and even worlds. The boy was safe, the women trusted him, and he had become an integral part of a story far larger than himself. And all of it had begun with one simple act of warmth, one decision to help someone in need, as Daniel watched Lyra asleep. The alien women standing quietly nearby, he felt a profound sense of peace. His life had changed in ways he could not have predicted, and yet every moment felt exactly as it should. He understood the quiet truth of the situation. Kindness has power, and a single act can ripple outward, touching lives, bridging worlds, and creating bonds that endure. Daniel smiled softly to himself, knowing that his journey had only just begun, and that the connections he had formed would remain with him, shaping his life and theirs forever.